Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. I read the most incredible story the other day. In Chicago, a woman by the name of Martens delivered her baby, Arianna, at 23 weeks. And Arianna, when she was born, weighed just 13 ounces. 13 ounces, 16 ounces makes a pound. So she was less than a pound. 13 ounces is just a smidge bigger and heavier than a can of Coke. And Tita had started showing signs of preeclampsia towards the end of her pregnancy. So they had to take Arianna out because preeclampsia is really scary if it gets too advanced. It's dangerous for mom and it's dangerous for baby. So to save mom's life and to give baby a chance to survive, they had to take Arianna out. The incredible thing is that more than 4 months after Arianna's early arrival, they got to take her home. Oh my God, the stories like that never get old for me. And I know we lived a story like that. My son was born at 24 weeks and 5 days, and he came home on a day after his due date, 3.5 months later. But still, to read other people's stories of these teeny tiny little babies just fighting for their life, and the incredible support that they get medically, scientifically, just how much technology has progressed to help babies like her survive is amazing. It never gets old to read stories like that. And every time I hear a story like that, I just get chills, you know? Like, wow, what a little miracle. The thing is, though, prematurity is really serious. It's really serious. And stories like Arianna's are great. They're fantastic for hope. But the reality is 1 in 10 babies in the United States are born prematurely, meaning before 37 weeks. But the health risks for a preterm baby are really high. Not to mention the medical costs of having a baby born early, having a baby in the NICU, they're astronomical. I think something like every year, $26 billion are spent on taking care of premature babies. 26 billion with a B. But the health issues are really what's concerning to me, specifically, because they can range from neurological impairments to lung disease, needing surgeries, medical interventions, having learning disabilities, mental health problems as they grow. I mean, babies born early are at risk for a ton of health problems. But we just don't seem to talk about it enough. So I'm here today to tell you that if you're at risk for delivering early, no matter how early that might be, you have to be prepared for what it means to be a preemie parent. The truth is that not all preemies are made equally. And when we're talking about a baby born before 37 weeks, that's such a range for what a baby could be like and what the start to its life could be like. Now, not all preemies are made equally, but not all babies are made equally, of course. But you can't compare one baby to another just based on their gestational age of when they're born. Because every baby has a completely different course, a completely different life after they're born. Prematurity is an umbrella term for any baby born before 37 weeks, but depending on when they're born, the course of their life is kind of set a little bit differently. And even then, within that course, there's a lot of variability. Usually, prematurity is qualified into 4 major categories: extremely preterm, are for babies born before 28 weeks. Now, 28 weeks is the cutoff for the third trimester. So we're talking about babies like mine and Tita's that were born in the second trimester. Then very preterm is considered 28 to 32 weeks. Moderately preterm is considered about 32 to 34, and late preterm is considered 34 to 36. Now, depending on when that baby's born, they're going to require different interventions, different lengths of NICU stay. There's going to be different risks of a variety of health issues going forward. Stories like Antita's and mine are definitely stories of hope, no doubt. And I remember looking to stories like ours when I was on hospital bed rest to just give us some hope that our son would survive and he would be able to come home and be a happy, healthy kid. But prematurity is serious and it requires a lot of different kinds of effort and different types of fight, if you will, than what you're doing right now during your pregnancy. So if you're at risk for delivering early, you do need to be prepared for what's ahead. I knew I was going to deliver early pretty soon into my pregnancy. I want to say somewhere around 14, 15 weeks or so. We sat down with one of my perinatologists, and she was fantastic because she was so straight. She was very compassionate, very empathic, but she was direct with us. There's no questioning about what she meant by anything she said. And so I remember, I'll never forget it. I was sitting on the exam table, but it was like a reclining chair, kind of like a dentist chair type thing, but I was sitting up. And my husband was sitting to my left. The doctor was sitting in front of us. And she looked at both of us and she said, I'm going to be really straight with you guys. The future is going to be very uncertain with a lot of ups and downs for you. I think up until that point, I'd already had 2 complications and I was about to start a third, but we didn't know that yet. And so she said, given how your pregnancy has started, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. Likely a lot of appointments with us, very likely a lot of in and out in the hospital. And I don't know what's going to happen. Your baby could come too early and he may not survive. We didn't know he was a boy then, but you know, the baby may not survive. Or you can carry to term or something in between. I don't know what's going to happen. And that's really disconcerting, actually, when your doctor flat out tells you that. I mean, I'd rather have a doctor who tells me that than to pretend that they know what's going to happen and pretend like they have a crystal ball when they actually don't. I'd rather have a doctor be honest with me. But it's disconcerting that it has to do with my child's life and nobody knows what's going to happen. It's terrifying. And I did end up in the hospital. 22 weeks and 4 days. If you listen to episode 1 of Delivering Miracles, I talk about that hospital stay because I didn't get the opportunity to do the in and out that she had predicted because I didn't make it out until he was born. Things had gotten so bad that they didn't feel comfortable sending me home. And by the time I went home, I'd already delivered him. 24 weeks and 5 days. I knew he was going to come early. I was really hoping it wouldn't be that early. Really, really hoping. The first time that I saw him was about 3-ish hours after he was born. And I just remember being so shocked and thinking, I'm not supposed to know what you look like right now. I'm not supposed to be seeing you right now. He was tiny. My husband, who wears a really regular sized, kind of a medium sized wedding ring, that wedding ring went all the way up to his shoulder. My son's shoulder, because he was that small. It actually probably would have gone up his thigh, but we didn't try it. That day, actually, we didn't even touch him. We were so scared. He was so tiny and so fragile. And I remember thinking, this place is loud. The NICU is loud. There's monitors and beeping and nurses and doctors everywhere talking, and there's just machines going. It's loud in there. And it's confusing because you don't know what's going on. You don't know what to expect. By this point, I had become really familiar with my fertility clinic. I knew what all the machines were for. I knew what all the syringes were for. I knew what each exam room looked like. And I was really familiar with my OB and MFM's offices. But this place was like a brand new planet that I had no idea what it was about. And you know what was really hard about that? Was the transition. This was something I totally didn't expect. I delivered him and my MFM came running downstairs from her office upstairs to come see me. Her office is in the same building, thankfully. And she told me that she would go find my husband, who hadn't made it to the birth in time because my son was born so fast. And that was the last that I saw her. I thought for sure that when I was in the NICU with my son, that at least they would come by, we'd see each other, there'd be some contact, but there really isn't. Once your baby's born and is sent to the NICU, your prenatal team is now switched over to your NICU team. And I was not prepared for that. And I didn't like it. I mean, now the NICU team is our family. I mean, so many of the nurses are friends of ours, and the neonatologists are friends of ours, and we email back and forth, and we see each other often. At the time, they were just strangers. I didn't know these guys. I didn't know who they were. And I mean, obviously, professionally, they care for my child, but do they really care about my child? They didn't know us other than from a chart. They weren't there with us through all the fighting and all the ups and downs and the whole length of everything that we had been through up until that point. There wasn't trust yet. And now all of a sudden my son's life is in their hands. It was a really hard pill to swallow, I'll be honest. And it was just like a trial by fire thing. There was no time. There's no time for me to heal. There was no time for me to acclimatize myself. It was just, and go. And that kind of overwhelm and that kind of shock that you feel already because your child's born so early. And then on top of that, to become familiar with a whole new team of people in a whole new area of the hospital that you had hoped you'd never see, it's really overwhelming. And it's just a whole other level of stress on top of everything that we had been through up until that point. No one wants to have a preemie. But if you're at risk at all for delivering early, you have to be prepared. So I'm going to give you some insider tips on what to expect if you have a preemie. And there's so many of them, but these are my top 5. The number 1 is that you're going to have to be your baby's loudest voice. Right now, during pregnancy, you might be able to get away with not speaking up that much, although if you're a client of mine, you know that I don't let you get away with that. I do teach you how to speak up because it's extremely important for your prenatal care. But once you're in the NICU, like I said, it's loud in there, and so you've got to be louder. And I don't necessarily mean the sound of your voice, but there's a lot going on. And so you have to get used to speaking up, asking questions, making sure that you understand what's going on, and being in charge of your child's care. You have to. I got a notebook, a binder actually, and I created these little templates that I printed out and I wrote every single day. Questions that I had, the answers to those questions, test results, how much he weighed. Once he started feeding on actual milk or formula, I was tracking that. I was tracking his medications. I was tracking everything, including something good that happened every day. And some days, seriously, the only good thing I would write was I got to see him today because it was that bad of a day. But I wanted something positive every single day. And that's what I encourage my clients to do too. You have to be in charge of your child's care. And there's a lot of information that's thrown at you. So write it down. Have a place where you write it down. If you are able to make it to rounds in the NICU, go and be there. Listen to what the doctors are saying, what the specialists are saying. Make sure everybody's on the same page. It's not fair that you have to do that, but doctors are just humans. And it's really important that you have your eyes and ears on all of this. The second thing I want you to know is that a preemie is not just a tiny full-term baby. No matter how early they're born, whether it's 36 weeks or it's 22 weeks, preemies have extra needs and they have special care that's often required to be monitored by specialists. So, and I say this because I don't want you to be surprised. I have so many friends who delivered at like 36 plus 1, 36 plus 6, like so close to term that they assumed that the baby was just a full-term kid. And then all of a sudden, they're having to go to speech therapy. They're having to go to physical therapy. They've got, one specialist after another tracking growth or development or something. And it's a surprise. It wasn't a surprise for us because at 24 plus 5, we assumed that he was going to need some help developing. When you're born that close to term, I think a lot of parents assume everything's okay. It's not a big deal. And that when or if you need that extra support, it becomes a huge surprise. So that's why I'm sharing this with you, that if that happens, it's not actually that surprising. Preemies do need some extra support. And so it's okay to expect that and to even ask for it to give your baby the best chance at developing going forward. Number 3 is that your preemie is not the only one that needs extra support. You need it too. Raising a premature child, whether it's in the NICU or after you come home from the NICU, it's a different kind of job because babies who are born early often have different kinds of care that they require. For example, babies who are born really early, so before 32 weeks, often need to be on what's called lockdown when they come home, especially if they come home in the cold and flu season, because their lungs are underdeveloped and their immunity is very low. And so what could be a regular cold to a full-term baby could get very dangerous very quickly to a preterm baby. Lockdown is something that I never expected. I imagine after so many months of bed rest and being confined to a hospital bed and then being confined to a NICU for so many months, we'd get to take him home and I could finally be free. And that was totally not the case. We were on lockdown for 2.5 years before he was healthy enough to be in public. I have a friend who had several friends, like I said, who had babies around 36 weeks, somewhere in that range between 36 and 37 weeks. They spent a couple months or at their first winter being very careful not to be around people who are sick, not to be around big groups, because yes, their babies were born close to term, but they weren't full term. And so you have to be extra careful. And that can come as a surprise too. And because of that, you need the extra support. You need help at home. You need help to get out. You need somebody looking after you because your intense focus is going to be on your baby. So if you are at risk for delivering early, you want to set that support up early too. Tell your friends what you need. Ask for help. Ask for food. Ask for them to help around the house because your job is going to be on your baby. You can let everybody else do everything else. Number 4 is you've got to take it slow. Now, if you already have a high-risk pregnancy, you're kind of getting a dose of this already, that you can't look too far ahead because you don't know what's going to happen. And the same thing happens with preemies. You don't know what's going to happen. They told us in the NICU that the first 7 days are a honeymoon period, and that after that, things really start kind of showing their true colors about where we stand. And I didn't want to believe that. I was like, look at my kid. He's 24 weeker, but he's flying. He's doing so great. Everything's going to be awesome. And everything you're telling me, none of it's going to come true. And we're just going to be out of here sooner than you realize. I really needed to believe that. I really, really needed to believe that. But they were right. In the NICU, it's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, at least. There were some phases in the NICU with him that it was 1 step forward, 4 steps back. And it was extremely frustrating. Especially after being there for so many months, I was just like, oh my gosh, can we just get out of here? And it wears you down. And it's overwhelming to look ahead, and you look at your due date, you look at other babies going home, and you just go, when is that going to be me? Whether you're there for 2 weeks or you're there for 2 months, time in the NICU is so warped. So you've got to take it slow. Look at your baby and focus on what's happening right now. If there's ever a time and place for mindfulness, it is in the NICU, because you just cannot predict what's going to happen. And I share that with you because that's one of the hardest parts about being in the NICU, is not knowing. I mean, if you think the uncertainty now is hard, it just takes it to a completely different level in the NICU when you see your baby right there and you just want to. There were so many moments when we joked that, hey, the nurses aren't here and he's doing okay. Can we just take him and run? We would joke, especially towards the end when we were waiting on a couple of test results to come back and normalize before we could take him. It was so tempting, man. It was so tempting. The last one that I'm going to leave you with is that babies are not statistics. If you're in the hospital on hospital bed rest, you're likely going to talk to a neonatologist, and they're going to tell you some really awful numbers. When our neonatologist, one of them, came and talked to us the day after I was admitted, I was 22 weeks and 5 days. At that time, they gave my son an 11% chance of survival with mild neurological impairments. 11%. Those were horrible numbers. The percentages, they just wildly large numbers for the chance of neurological problems, of blindness, of deafness, of all kinds of, it was the most depressing conversation I've ever had in my life. But I know it had to happen. They needed to prepare us for what's coming, which is why I'm talking to you about this today, so you're prepared even more ahead of time. And so I want to tell you, babies are not statistics. And you know what got me through that? All those horrible numbers that they were throwing at us. You know what got me through that? And I said this to the neonatologist too, and the next day I said it to my perinatologist also, was, you're not telling me 0. And you're not telling me 100%. That 100% chance that something terrible is going to happen, or a 0% chance that something good can happen. And if you're not saying that, that means there's hope. Because the thing that numbers don't take into account is a baby's sheer will to survive. A baby's own individual characteristics that are going to protect him or her from whatever health problems could be coming their way. We don't know these babies, just like we don't know what their personality is going to be like. And maybe you sit there with your partner once in a while thinking about, I wonder what this kid's going to grow up to be. And you imagine it could be all kinds of things, right? They could be an artist. They could be a rocket scientist. They could be a podcaster. They could be anything, right? Just like that, their health is just as uncertain. And that means that there's hope. That the numbers they're giving you are to guide you and to give you a general sense of what happens to many babies, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen to yours. And I want you to hold on to that every time you have these conversations with your doctors. So these 5 tips that I have so many. I could talk to you about this for hours and hours. But the 5 that I want to show you, and I want you to really take home today, are that you have to be your baby's loudest voice. To remember that a preemie is not just a tiny full-term baby. They've got their own extra needs. You also, as a preemie parent, need extra support. Take it slow, don't look too far ahead, and your baby is not a number. I also have a downloadable guide on 2 other really important factors that are critical to consider when you are preparing for a preemie, which is making sure that you are going to deliver at a hospital that has the right kind of NICU for your baby, and a list of what to pack in your hospital bag if you think you're at risk for your baby going to the NICU. So you can grab that free resource from my website at parijatdeshpande.com/preemie. And you can just download that and you'll get that right in your inbox. Nobody wants a preemie. Nobody wants that. I know women say that, oh my gosh, I wish this baby would just come already. I'm so uncomfortable. And I can only empathize because I don't know what it's like to carry that late into the pregnancy. But nobody, if you really knew what a preemie entailed, nobody wants that. So if you're at risk for delivering early, you've got to be prepared. You got to talk about this stuff. Prepare yourself so that if your baby does come early, you know what to do and you can get right to it. I got an awesome email the other day from a listener. So I'm super glad that she wrote in. So I'm going to share that with you right now. Nancy writes, my best friend had a baby so early that he almost died and it was super scary. Now I am 3 months pregnant. Is there anything I can do to prevent a preterm birth? Nancy, I'm so glad you wrote. I'm so glad you wrote. This is something that a lot of people have in the back of their heads. The more that we talk about prematurity, the more that preemies survive. And there are all these stories like Antita's and mine of our children surviving. In the back of a lot of people's heads is, oh my God, is that going to happen to me too? Because it starts to feel really close to you, right? It starts to feel really possible or realistic. So I'm really glad you asked, Nancy, because yes, there is so much that you can do to prevent preterm birth. One of the things, one of the missions that guides the work that I do, why I am working with clients like you, is because there's so much you can do to prevent preterm birth. Okay? It starts with, and I know you're already pregnant, but if you're not pregnant yet, it starts with a preconception consultation. If you had a high-risk pregnancy before or a preemie before, you want to see a perinatologist. Otherwise, you can do this with your OB and really go over your whole health history and figure out if you have any risk factors for any pregnancy complications. Not smoking, not drinking, making sure you exercise regularly if you're allowed to, having a healthy diet, sleeping enough. And by enough, I mean approximately 7 to 8 hours a night with good quality sleep is critical. There are research studies that connect not getting enough sleep with spontaneous preterm labor. And you want to make sure that you're managing your stress. I cannot emphasize this enough. There's so much data on the impact of emotional stress as well as all other kinds of physical stress on your risk for developing preterm contractions and for delivering early. There's a research study that was done recently that showed that women who delivered prematurely, more than half of them had stress as an attributable risk factor. And this is why I do what I do. Because nobody's talking about this, and this is all stuff that you can control. So Nancy, I really strongly urge you to take a good look at your lifestyle and look at all these different factors and see if there's anything that you can improve. And if you are worried about delivering early, I really strongly urge you to start improving it right away. You have no idea what a difference that can make. I know for my case, managing my stress, I am so certain is what gave me the extra 15 days with my son. Because according to medicine and science and everyone that was at the hospital, I should have delivered him at 22 plus 4 or 22 plus 5. So it's not a causal relationship, but it plays a huge role. Your whole lifestyle, how you're eating, how you're sleeping, how you're hydrating, All these things really matter. So that's what I recommend to you. And if you're like Nancy and you're worried about developing preterm contractions, or you're worried about delivering early, if you're in the hospital and you're trying to stay pregnant, all these things matter. I'm here with you. So take a look at your life and see where you can start. Pick one and start making it better. I know you can do this. There are so many preemies out there, though. It's not just me. It's not just Antita. Colin Farrell was a preemie. Did you know that? And he was apparently a micro preemie. I read somewhere, I think he was like 1 pound, 10 ounces or something, or maybe I'm making that number up, but it's something like, he was really tiny. And Stevie Wonder, you know, he wears those sunglasses because he's blind. That blindness was because of prematurity. It's called retinopathy of prematurity, something that a lot of preemies are at risk for developing. But we're able to prevent blindness so much better than back when he was born. So there's hope, right? There's hope. There's stories like mine, like Antita's, these celebrities who were born early. What's their name? Anna Faris and I want to say Chris Pratt, right? Chris Pratt, not Chris Rock. Anna Faris and Chris Pratt had their baby really early. A lot of these celebrities are now talking about their early birds that came out and their NICU stays and stuff. And there's hope. There is hope. So if you are at risk, take comfort in that. But also know that you need to be prepared. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you want to know more about how to prepare for a preemie, make sure you download my free resource on my website, parijatdeshpande.com/preemie. And if you want to know more about how you can reduce your risk of delivering prematurely, schedule a consultation on my website at parijatdeshpande.com. I would love to talk to you. And I'd also love to stay in touch. So follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Parijat Desh. That's PARIJATDESH. Having a preemie or being at risk for preterm delivery is scary and overwhelming. I totally get it. I've been there. But as the great A.A. Milne said, always remember, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do